My dear brothers and sisters, the love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you from Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi branch. The title of today's session is Death is a Passage, Not the Goal of Our Walk. And this comes from a line in Savitri, Sri Aurobindo's epic scripture. This topic was particularly chosen because next week we have events associated with Sri Aurobindo leaving his body in 1950. He left his body on the 5th of December 1950, and the body was kept for some time for the disciples to have the last darshan of the material frame. It was interesting that in spite of the heat of Pondicherry and no cooling device being used, the body did not show any signs of putrefaction for at least 5 days. And it was only on the 9th of December that the body was laid to rest in the Samadhi. This is something which was not permitted. Pondicherry was a French colony, and it was not allowed under the law to keep a body like that. And so a doctor came to examine, and he was also surprised that the body showed no signs of putrefaction, and therefore they overlooked the law and let it happen. And the doctor who was treating Sri Aurobindo for his terminal illness, he also was surprised, and the mother showed him the special character of that body, that it was not an ordinary body. There was a blue light emanating from it. And one can understand, because Sri Aurobindo was bringing down the supramental on earth, and his body was possibly supramentalized, which means he did not, the normal laws of decay which govern matter did not apply to that bodily frame. And that is the significance also of the relics, that is the hair and the nails, some small parts of that material frame which have now traveled all over the world. And this ashram was the first one to receive those relics a year after its inception. The ashram was established formally in 1956, and in December 1957 we received the relics of Sri Aurobindo from Pondicherry. This was the first center to which the mother sent those relics, and they are there in that shrine outside on your right hand side. That small marble structure that has a cube at its center, and at the base of the cube are the relics of Sri Aurobindo. Now the title is from Savitri, and it says that death is a passage, not the goal of our walk. Now death is a passage from where to where? It's a passage from this world to some other world, and that is necessary if we have to come back to this world again. And that's what sort of it signifies. And further it says not the goal of the walk, which means that the walk or the journey comes to a sort of a station, if not the end, at the time of death. But that is not what we are in this world for. We seldom reach the goal of life in this world while living our life. Now this is quite in contrast with the nature's intention when this world was created. And that is what comes out from these lines in Savitri. A little before this line that death is a passage, and this is on page 196 in my edition of the Savitri. It's a book 2, Canto 6, page 196. And if your copy also has lines, then it is line 821 from where I'm starting on page 196. And many editions currently available have the same page numbers. A fire to call eternity into time, make bodies joy as vivid as the soul's, earth she would lift to neighborhood with heaven. So the intentions of nature when this world was created was to bring heaven down to earth. A fire, that is a passion and a strong desire nature had to call eternity into time. The world is governed by time. Anything ephemeral, anything which does not last forever is governed by time. But nature wanted to bring into this world, which is an entity in time, that it has a beginning and an end, but nature wanted to bring into it eternity. And make bodies joy as vivid as the soul's. A spark of the eternal, the spark of the divine is there in our body. Nature wanted to bring to this body the joy as vivid as that of the soul, as vivid as that of the eternal, which our soul is. So the soul, is always in a state of joy. It knows no anger, it knows no sorrow, it knows no hatred or jealousy or any of the negativities which characterize the human being. It shows none of those, and therefore it's in a state of perpetual joy, and that is the type of joy of the soul that that nature intended to bring into the body. Which means that was the goal intended, that although the way we are constituted, the way the rest of the creation is constituted, we manifest only a small bit of the divinity hidden within us. We are all manifestations of the divine. All creation is a manifestation of the divine. But none of the creatures created so far, plants or animals, manifest the divinity hidden within them completely. They are partial expressions, limited expressions in a variety of ways. The expressions are all different. There's so much diversity, but the underlying essence is the same. The essence is the divinity hidden within, and only a small fraction of it, not necessarily the same fraction, is what is expressed in different types of creation. And the overall sort of goal was that the earth she would lift, that is nature would lift, to neighborhood with heaven, make it similar to heaven, make it quite close to heaven. Now heaven is that other world where divinity is expressed more or less completely, to a much greater extent than on this earth, normally. But then on this earth we have human beings, select few amongst whom have been expressing divinity to a much larger extent, and those are our rishis and sages and the mystics. And so it's not impossible, but then that does not create heaven on earth, because their number is only a few and far between. So the intention of nature was to multiply this tribe of those who express this divinity much more, so that the earth resembles heaven. And this is considered to be one of the most difficult projects undertaken by nature. As Aurobindo said somewhere, that the heaven, it was easy for nature to create. The difficulty was in creating earth. Because if you want uniformity, if you just want to express yourself, it is much easier than to hold a lot back, express only a part, different parts of it, and have good and evil existing simultaneously, and yet reach that goal of making earth like heaven. So earth was a far more difficult project for nature than heaven. And a few lines later, Sri Aurobindo says, life of gods in heaven she sees above, a demigod emerging from an ape is all she can in our mortal element. So while nature can see what heaven is like, there we have a life of gods in heaven. So she can see how that world is, how heaven is, where the life as that of gods, a life of gods in heaven she sees above. A demigod emerging from an ape is all she can in our mortal element. Whereas on earth, all she has been able to accomplish is a demigod, that is half a god, half divine and half animal. That's what she has been able to accomplish, emerging from an ape. that is evolved from an ape, a monkey-like creature, is all she can, or is all that she has been able to do, at least so far, in our mortal element, in this mortal frame. That is all she has been able to accomplish. So that is in fact a far cry from the ultimate intention of nature. And then a few lines later, a sense of limit haunts her masteries, and nowhere is assured content or peace. For all the depth and beauty of her work, a wisdom lacks that sets the spirit free. And this is because of the limitations of the human being that has been created. A sense of limit haunts her masteries, although there's plenty of mastery that has been introduced even in this process of creation, but her masteries also have a sense of limit on earth, and nowhere is assured content or peace. So contentment and peace are something which delude what nature has created on earth. A sense of limit haunts her masteries, and nowhere is assured content or peace. For all the depth and beauty of her work, a wisdom lacks that sets the spirit free. So in spite of all the depth and beauty of the artwork that she has created, of the marvels of architecture that she has created on this earth, all the creation on this earth, although it has plenty of depth and beauty, but in spite of that, a wisdom lacks. It lacks a certain type of wisdom. What type of wisdom it lacks? The wisdom that could set the spirit free, which means that is, let the spirit express itself fully and freely. That is something which has not been achieved in spite of all the depth and beauty of her work. A sense of limit haunts her masteries, and nowhere is assured content or peace. For all the depth and beauty of her work, a wisdom lacks that sets the spirit free. And that's how we can then, in that context, understand this line with which we started. I'll start a few lines before that. Now, on page 197, our being must move eternally through time. Death helps us not, vain is the hope to seize. A secret will compels us to endure, our life's repose is in the infinite. It cannot end, its end is life supreme. Our being, that is what we are, must move eternally through time. We must move through time, but for a long time, which seems like eternity. So we must keep moving to complete this journey from the imperfection we are to the perfection which nature intended us to be. Our being must move eternally through time. Death helps us not, vain is the hope to seize. So death does not seem to help us, which means we die much before completing the journey. Vain is the hope to seize, and therefore it is futile to hope that that is the end, because the goal has still not been reached. And that's something which, one has to also remember, that why suicide is not the solution. In spite of all the difficulties one may have in this world, taking our own life, feeling that, well, now if I end it, then it will be all over, it is not over. We'll be brought here back once again to continue the journey. So that is not really the end. And cutting short nature's intention by bringing death prematurely will only mean at least prolonging the journey, if not some punishment for cutting short that nature's intention. So, our being must move eternally through time. Death helps us not, vain is the hope to seize. A secret will compels us to endure. There is a secret will behind what we are constituted, the will of the divine, which compels us to endure. It compels us to endure all the difficulties, problems, hardships, struggles in this world. Our life's repose is in the infinite. Ultimate rest will come only when we are in the infinite, when we merge with the infinite, when we become one with the infinite. One with the infinite doesn't mean that we don't come back to this world. That's something which Aurobindo keeps emphasizing again and again. And as the Gita says, the ultimate goal is man mana bhava. Be my-minded, Sri Krishna says. That is, be like me. Let your mind function like my mind. So that is union with the divine. That is becoming one. So that spontaneously we behave in the same way as nature would want us, as the divine would want us. So be my-minded, says Sri Krishna. That be like me, let your mind function like my mind. If that happens, then all the problems of human existence are solved. And if that happens on a large scale, as Sri Aurobindo and the Mother have visualized, not only for the individual, all the problems of this world are over for the world as a whole. So our life's repose is in the infinite. So our real rest does not come through death, it comes through becoming one with the infinite. And for that, if necessary to come again and again, we should be prepared to come again and again, because death does not solve the problem, it does not help us. Vain is the hope to seize, a secret will compels us to endure. Our life's repose is in the infinite. It cannot end, its end is life supreme. The end is life supreme, that is the highest type of life that is possible on earth, which is achieved in that state of manmanabhava, becoming God-minded. Death is a passage, not the goal of our walk. Death is only a passage from this world to some other world where we can do something and come back again. Do what? That we'll see a little later, do what in that other world. But certainly, the journey does not move substantially further in any other world. For the journey to continue and move further, we have to come back to this world. So death is a passage, not the goal of our walk. Some ancient deep impulsions labors on. Something deeply planted in us compels us to just labor on in spite of all the difficulties. Our souls are dragged as with a hidden leash. As if somebody is dragging us, we are on the leash. Like, you take a dog for a walk on the leash. So we are also being taken on a leash somewhere on a walk on this journey, and then comes this station, and then which we call death, and then we go somewhere else. So we are being dragged on. Our souls are dragged as with a hidden leash, carried from birth to birth, carried from life to life, from one birth on this earth to the next birth, from world to world. After death, from this world to some other world, our acts prolong after the bodies fall, the old perpetual journey without pause. And why does the journey become so long? A very sort of brief summary in these 2 lines. Our acts prolong after the bodies fall, the old perpetual journey without pause. So what prolongs the journey is our own acts, which means we do not act well enough for the journey to be completed in one life. So our acts are responsible for prolonging the journey. Our acts prolong our karmas, how we live this life. Our acts prolong after the bodies fall, the old perpetual journey without pause. After the bodies fall, that's after death. So since in this life we did not complete the journey because our acts were not good enough, after the bodies fall, that is after death, the old perpetual journey continues without a pause. Now, let's dwell a little more on this analogy of the hidden leash, that is, as if we are on a leash. Imagine a tree, and behind the tree is some higher force with a long rope which has been just thrown at us. And we are tied to that rope. So at one end is one of us. In fact, each one of us, one can say, tied with a rope, a very long rope, and at the other end is the tree, behind which is that hidden divine, that higher force. Now, the rope is so long that we can run around wherever we want, and we feel that I have a free will, I can act as I want. But what is happening secretly is that hidden force, the divine, hiding behind the tree, is gradually pulling that leash, so that the rope is getting shorter. And before it gets too short, we leave this world, come back again, but now the rope is where we left it last time. So it is shorter than before. Finally, when one of the lives, a stage comes when the rope is so short that if we try to run away from it, there's a lot of strain. On the other hand, we can see the tree, and the tree has fruit. It's very attractive. We get tempted by the fruit, and we feel that instead of trying to run around here and there, why not start walking towards the tree? So now we are using our free will not to just run here and there at random. We are now using our free will to walk towards the tree, because the tree is very tempting and it avoids that strain which is there if we try to move too away from the tree. And the tree itself is tempting, so why not walk towards the tree? Now this is the life. So each of these lives you can see, this is the life in which we start walking the path consciously. We consciously realize the purpose of life. The purpose of life is to go towards that tree, and we start doing it consciously. It is not through trial and error that some sort of accident that we end up a little nearer the tree. It is not purely because the rope is being pulled that we end up nearer the tree. It is now a conscious effort. We are collaborating with the divine that is trying to pull us to complete our journey. So we are now collaborating with that larger scheme, with the ultimate intention of nature. We are collaborating with it by walking towards the tree deliberately, consciously. And then a stage comes when behind the tree we can see who is it that is actually pulling that rope. And when we see that, then you become one with that. That is union with the divine. You forget about the rope, you forget about the tree, you forget even the fruit which tempted us. Just that union itself is bliss, and you don't want anything else. So that is the ultimate. So that is the sort of hidden leash on which we all are. So realizing that we are born highly imperfect, to complete this journey towards perfection is much more than a lifetime's job. And therefore, rebirth becomes a logical necessity, as Aurobindo says in the Life Divine. So it's not that we just have to believe in rebirth because the rishis and the mystics have seen it. We have not seen it, and therefore we can't believe in it, but easily. Many of us perhaps don't believe in it, but all the same, it is apart from faith and belief, it is also a logical necessity, if we consider perfection to be the goal of life. And that is what this, explains also the wide spectrum of human nature. Because the entire human population cannot be at the same stage when it comes to this journey. We are all at different stages of the same journey, but at different stages of it. And that is what explains the entire range of human behavior, ranging from the compassionate, highly compassionate, to the very cruel, from the very miserly to the very generous. You have all types of variations, and that is because we are at different stages of this journey. And we sometimes put it as the level of consciousness. The farther away the consciousness is from the Supreme Consciousness, which is the ultimate goal, the less of the divinity we are expressing, and therefore the person may be cruel, may be miserly, and may be having all those negativities which we can understand, we can all relate to them. The major six negativities: kama, krodha, lobha, moha, matsarya, ahankar. So those desire, anger, greed, attachment, jealousy, and arrogance. So these are the six sort of basic negativities. We can understand them, but some would have them to a much larger extent than others. That is because of the stage of evolution at which we are, or the stage at we are in terms of this journey of the soul. That is what explains it. And that is why those who are at the beginning, that is, who have probably become human beings for the first time in this life, can behave much worse than animals. I am saying much worse than animals because to feel that animals are always misbehaved or have all the negative qualities and man is the best species is in a way a reflection of the pride of our own species, or a collective ego of the species, you might say. Animals can be far better than human beings. I have been reading for the last few weeks a book by a person called Bernie Siegel, who's otherwise a cancer surgeon but also an animal lover. He's now 92. Now he has put together in this book a collection of stories from a very large number of people about the behavior of animals, the relationship between human beings and animals, and relationship between different species of animals. And they all bring out some of the things which animals have done which can put human beings to shame. And I'll not go into most of them, but just to give you a glimpse, there is the story of a household which had a dog whom they had named Duke. And to this house came a little girl very regularly. She was from a poor family, and they would give her some food. But then, along with the food, more what the girl enjoyed was that this dog would go down and play with the girl. And here this lady is talking about a scene in the kitchen when she is making a peanut butter sandwich for the girl. And this peanut butter sandwich is a favorite also of the dog. But the dog is just dancing around. Duke danced around my feet. He knew who was waiting for him downstairs. The downstairs was waiting, that poor girl. He loved this little girl with an extra measure of love, if that was possible. Somehow he understood that her home life wasn't so great. Dogs and children go together like peanut butter and jelly, and the friendship between these two proved it. And then, they went down together, this lady, the dog, with that peanut butter sandwich. And the girl started eating it. The dog started dancing and playing with her. The dog was attentive to every crumb that dropped while the girl was eating, attentive to every crumb. Dog also liked it, but the dog was not asking for the sandwich. It would just pick up the crumbs that dropped. Duke was attentive to every crumb that dropped, but refrained from asking for a bite. Duke loved her simply by being there. She offered him love in return, the love she so badly wanted and desperately needed to receive. Theirs was a relationship at soul level, and they communicated using a language of the heart. Then, there's another story of a dog who acted as a lifeguard. He would accompany the entire team of lifeguards which were employed to save people who might be drowning near the river or the ocean. And the dog was a lifeguard. He would know when a person should not be allowed to enter, when it's more risky, it would come in the way, and then if the people still insisted on going, it will bark, it will try to stop them. If they still insisted on going, it would jump into the water and help them and bring them back. Acted as a lifeguard. And like other employees, they treated the dog also as one of them, and finally when it was too old, got a very beautiful retirement and a post-retirement job which it could now do. That's a story about that dog. Then, there was a story about a girl who was just beginning to read, and she would make mistakes. Probably she was not very good at reading, and she would get very frustrated. And the other children would bully her. But here, during these visits to the library, in the library there was this dog, and that's where she found her comfort. Just learning to read, the girl easily became frustrated by new words. She is also being teased and bullied on the playground at school. But then this dog, whose name was Chase and I found we can also be an antidote to bullying, offering true friendship that cushions her in a world that sometimes feels unkind. 15 minutes of friendship and undivided attention not only builds the girl's confidence in reading, but also makes a positive difference in her self-esteem. All the while, she is learning to love and be kind to dogs. And now, in fact, it's now quite common knowledge. We find it in the press and popular articles, etc., everywhere, that dogs particularly, and to some extent cats, are being used as therapy. And they are doing a very good job comparable to some of the best counselors. So that's why I said that human beings who are very cruel and unkind and end up being criminals, etc., are in some ways worse than animals. So to say that human being is at least better than animal is probably just the collective ego of the human species. Of course, I'm not blaming all those who turn to crime and all and become antisocial elements, because quite often at the root of it is not that they are necessarily born at a very low level of consciousness, which may be only partly true. Part of it is that they did not get enough love in their childhood. That is emerging as a major cause for antisocial behavior when the person is grown up. So the type of childhood that the person had has a great impact on later life. And this phenomenon is now coming out more and more into the open in the West. And I'm sure the prevalence is not very different in this country, because basic human nature is the same. That the childhood physical and sexual abuse, observing domestic violence in the house, the child not knowing what I will face when I go back home, but yet still not having any other choice, because at that age the child has no other choice but to go back home, in spite of knowing that when I go back home I might see that there is no food to eat. I might find that my father is drunk, my father is beating my mother, or my father might start beating me. In spite of knowing all that, the child has no choice but to go back from school to home. And in the school, if the child is not paying attention to studies, that's not the child's fault. And then if when the child grows up, it turns into a criminal, again, it was we who were responsible, the society that was responsible, not necessarily that the child arrived at a very low level of consciousness. So that also we have to be conscious of. But all the same, in spite of all the difficult childhood, why is it that some are able to turn a new leaf in their life and in fact go to the other extreme and become saints from this very category? That also examples are there, which means that this was an experience which was in some way necessary for them, probably for their further spiritual growth, and they could turn the leaf around. So some can become that, whereas the other set is becoming a criminal. Why these two differences? Again, because of the difference in the level of consciousness at which they arrived. One had a bad childhood and ended up being a criminal. Another had a bad childhood, similar, comparably bad childhood, but the child ended up eventually becoming either an activist, a social reformer, a saint, a sage. So that is what this world, this completely baffling and puzzling world is about. And we are all trying to make some sense out of it. Anyway, so now returning to this person whose rope has become very short, and now he can see the tree and feels tempted to walk towards the tree consciously. This is something which the Gita has also talked about in chapter 6, where Arjuna asked Sri Krishna that what about the unsuccessful yogi who does not complete the journey? What happens to him? Is he not like a lost cloud, neither here nor there? He misses all the pleasures of life and doesn't even reach the spiritual goal. Because what one gives up in the process of walking the path, spiritual path, can also appear very tempting. But then the person gives it up because the person has found something else still more attractive. That's why he gives it up. So it's not really giving up. It's because you have discovered something far more attractive, far more enduring, of lasting value. And that is why you give it up. But at the same time, the person has given it up, although he doesn't feel he has given it up. So missing all those tempting things in this world and not even reaching the goal, what happens to that person? So then Sri Krishna assures him that no amount of effort put in the right direction in this life is a waste. And after the person has reached a certain level of consciousness, he is born in such a way that further progress will be much faster. So we get that help also from the divine when one person is ready to walk the conscious path, the circumstances given are such that the right since childhood, the person will have that tendency. If the child has that tendency early in childhood, then naturally he has much more time available to walk the journey. And for that, the right conditions are given. And the conditions Sri Krishna says are that he'll be born either in the family of yogis or in a prosperous family. Now, yogis' family, we can understand the atmosphere will be such that the child will walk that path because of the influence of the environment, because of the parental influence. But why either that or a prosperous family? Prosperous family also has its significance because if the person is relieved of the responsibility of having to work to keep body and soul together, person is born under comfortable conditions, then that also frees a lot of time, energy, and attention from the mundane tasks of the world. And if the person is at that level of consciousness, he'll utilize this greater freedom that the person has for doing something which will accelerate spiritual growth. So while wealth by itself does not lead to spiritual growth, wealth can provide some of those necessary conditions, a moderate amount of freedom from having to worry about the roti kapda makan, house, food, house and shelter. That does give us that freedom to indulge in the finer things of life, be it art, be it music, or be it something intended for spiritual growth. It does give us that freedom. So here says, Sri Krishna says in the shloka number 43 in the 6th chapter, Tatratam buddhi samyogam labhate parva dehikam yatate tato bhuyah samsiddhau kurunandanam. So he says, Tatratam buddhi samyogam yatate cha tato bhuyah labhate parva dehikam. So, Parva Dehikam, previous bodies. Labhate, because of what he has gained in the previous lives. Tatratam buddhi samyogam yatate cha tato bhuya. So, because of that, in his buddhi is such that because of what he has done, that he has now a buddhi which does what? Samsiddhau. He wants to make efforts to go towards siddhi, that is perfection. So he makes these efforts to go towards perfection because of the gains that he had made in the previous lives. He is born with that type of intelligence, that type of buddhi, that type of mental tendencies. Tatratam buddhi samyogam labhate parva dehikam yatate cha tato bhuya samsiddhau kurunandana. In Sanskrit sometimes happens what should come when we speak in English afterwards comes before and after, but you can put the whole thing together in that form. So because of these tendencies, he comes and then he makes fast progress and can complete the journey in a relatively short time. And finally, he'll be born in a life that in just that life, some finishing touches will be enough to take him to perfection. Once again, let me turn to the Gita, where there is an entire set of verses which are often used in obituaries, etc. But I'll just read one of them, which is about death being Just as death is a certainty, rebirth is also a certainty. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityu, dhruvam janma mritasya cha, tasmat pariharya arthe natvam shochitum arhasi. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityu. Anyone who is born, his death is certain. Dhruvam janma mritasya cha. There is one who has died, his birth is equally definite. Dhruva is, it's definite, certain, fixed. Tasmat apariharya arthe. Therefore, apariharya, what cannot be avoided. Arthe means for the sake of that. For the sake of which cannot be avoided, natvam shochitum arhasi. So, do not grieve, do not have any sorrow for the sake of something which is unavoidable, which is compulsory. And what is that? That is death for someone who is born and birth for the one who is died. We grieve for the death of the person who was once born. So, because that is a certainty, and the reassuring part is that rebirth is also a certainty, do not grieve. Now, whether one believes or does not believe in rebirth, the important thing is that birth, of course, is a certainty. The person is here, so the person was born. Death for that person is also a certainty, and there's an interval between the two. The important thing is what we do during that interval. So, how we spend that interval is what is important, and that is what we should focus on. And perhaps that's why we have not been given any memories of the previous lives, because that would be an unnecessary burden. Imagine a child who starts going to school and his head is already packed with a lot of useless, irrelevant information. Now, it will be much more difficult for this child than the child who starts from scratch. So, if we have to continue the journey further, perhaps it's important that we do not carry a lot of useless baggage from our previous lives, all the knowledge which may not be much of use. What is important is that we carry the essence of what we gained in the previous lives, and that the soul carries. So what the soul carries is essentially the essence. So in fact, it is believed that what happens in the interval between two lives is that after the person dies, the person goes to another world where all the experiences from this life, all the progress made in this life as a result of those experiences, that is consolidated, digested, incorporated, so that the essence can be brought back by the soul in that next life. And therefore, the interval that the person spends or the soul spends in those other worlds after death would depend upon how complex the lessons learnt were, how much was learnt, and how much time is needed to actually digest and consolidate all that. And it's generally believed that that interval is much longer than the life that we spend in this world. So human life is considered pretty long. 70, 80 is now very common. So it's a pretty long life. But then that stays even much longer than that, maybe in terms of hundreds and thousands of years before we come back again. And that's why, in fact, when a person dies, it is like going back home. So that is home. On the earth, we are guests. So we are guests here rather than inhabitants. And our true home is where we go after death, because we are likely to spend much longer times there. That is where we can sit and do our homework. All the homework, all the lessons that we learned here, we digest them by doing the homework in those other worlds. So you do all the work at home, isn't it? So this is only a school. The earth is a school, whereas those other worlds are our true home, where we go and do the homework. But then the important thing is what lessons we learn in this life, whether we use the opportunity of coming to school or we just squander that opportunity away. Because unless the lesson has been learnt, you can't do the homework, you can't digest it after going back home. So that is the important thing, and that is what we keep learning in all these discourses here. I'll end with a few lines from Savitri now, once again. Death is a stair, a door, a stumbling stride the soul must take to cross from birth to birth. A grey defeat, poignant with victory, a whip to lash us towards our deathless state. Death is a stair, a door, a stumbling stride. Three poetic descriptions of death. It is a stair. It's like, climbing a stair. A door towards something different. You do not know when you climb the stairs and what will be across the door. Death is a stair, a door, a stumbling stride. So it's an important step. It's a step, all right, but it's a stumbling stride because it is a sort of a jerk. It is a break. It's not continuous. So when we stumble on a stone, that continuity of that smooth walk is broken. So that smooth life which was running here, that's broken, and therefore the stumbling stride is a very beautiful sort of analogy. But at the same time, the stumbling stride helps us climb a staircase and go across the door to something different. Death is a stair, a door, a stumbling stride the soul must take to cross from birth to birth. So it's essential, because unless we are willing to die, how can we born to a new existence? So the soul must take this step, although it's a stumbling stride, to cross from birth to birth, because to come back to this world again, at least once we have to die. So it's a sort of a necessity the soul must take to cross from birth to birth. A grey defeat pregnant with victory. In a way, it looks like defeat, that life could not continue, it had to be ended, so it looks like a defeat. But same time, it is grey, which means not clearly black, if not all white. It's a grey defeat, which means there are many ways of looking at it. Say between black and white, there are many shades of grey. A grey defeat, but what type of a grey defeat? Pregnant with victory. It carries the seeds for victory. A whip to lash us towards our deathless state. It may feel painful, it may be something which you are afraid of, the way one would be afraid of a lash, but that lash is what takes us towards our deathless state. So death is the lash that takes us towards the deathless state. Deathless state would mean reaching that union with the divine and thereby getting to that state of immortality. Mrityorma amritam gamaya. So death is a stair, a door, a stumbling stride the soul must take to cross from birth to birth. A grey defeat pregnant with victory, a whip to lash us towards our deathless state.